We talk about the issues, the stories that inspire, building stronger communities, taking DC higher.
Education, housing, the things that shape our days, lifting every voice up, creating better ways. Stand up, speak out, together we are stronger. Stand up, speak out, the future starts right now. It's the people's voice, DC, where the people rise and speak. Hey, hey, real conversations, changing lives. Together we can lead. It's the people's voice, DC. Your voice matters here. From every ward and every block, the people's voice is clear.
Oh, yeah. No matter where you're coming from, your story matters too. When neighbors work together, there's nothing we can't do.
Real issues, real solutions, real people taking part, building hope across the city. One conversation start. This is our city. This is our time. Together we'll shine. The people's voice. The people's voice.
Every voice matters, every story counts.
People's voice. The people's voice. It's the people's voice. DC, where the people rise and speak. Real conversations, changing lives. Together we can lead. It's the people's voice. DC, your voice matters here. From everyone and every mind, the people's voice is clear.
Hosted by Pastor Mike, powered by Rising Voices. This is the people's voice.
People's voice.
DC, or you love DC, this one's for you. Welcome to the People's Voice DC, a podcast where the city speaks for itself. Not just politics, not just headlines. We're talking real life, community life, DC life. From the metro rides to the murals on the walls, from classrooms to corner stores, from church basements to community meetings. This is where conversations actually happen. We talk about what matters: housing and money, mental health and healing, culture, music and creativity, faith, purpose, and finding your way, relationships, parenting, and growing up in the city. Yeah, we talk politics too, but only because policies affect our everyday lives. This show is presented by Rising Voices of Politics and founded by Reverend Michael Campbell with one goal in mind: give the people the mic. And when we say the people, we mean everybody. Young folks with big ideas, creatives with something to say, parents holding it down, leaders in the making, and anyone who's ever felt like their voice didn't matter. Trust, it does. No fake debates, no talking down, no boring energy, just real conversations, good vibes and perspectives that feel like home. Catch us live every Wednesday at 6 p.m. on YouTube and social media by searching The People's Voice, DC, or Rising Voices of Politics. Miss the live show? It drops the same night at risingvoicesdc.org, and you can listen anytime on Spotify. So whether you're on your phone, in the car, in the dorm, or just trying to feel connected, tap in, tune in, and be part of something bigger. This is The People's Voice, DC, the city, the culture, the conversation. And yeah, the people got something to say.
Welcome, 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 welcome to this edition of the People's Voice DC. We have with us today a very, very special and dear guest to me, Mr. Ed Lazere. I am so excited that we have you on board. Our guest is the current director of legislative advocacy at the United Planning Organization, which is one of our city's oldest and most impactful anti-poverty organizations. Before joining the UPO, Ed founded the DC Fiscal Policy Institute in 2001. I hope I got that year correct. Where for
Yep.
nearly 2 decades, he became one of the district's leading voices on budgets, economic justice, education, housing, and tax policy. Welcome to the show, sir, and I hope that I got your intro correct.
That was perfect, and I'm really, really happy and honored to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yes, thank you. So we're going to dive right into it. You initially, um, as I stated, was the founding executive director of the DC Fiscal Institute. And I'm reading, of course, from the website where it talks about the vision. It says that you guys strive for a future that roots out anti-blackness, enables black and brown residents to live to their fullest, ends displacement, and repairs centuries of racist harm built into our system. Your mission is to shape racially just tax, budget, and policy decisions by centering black and brown communities in our research and analysis, community partnerships, and advocacy efforts to advance an anti-racist equitable future. Sir, I am honored, and I really just want to ask, like, how did this happen? How did you get here? Um, Especially as a non-black or brown person, as I may. Like, how did this start?
Yeah, that's a big question, but I appreciate that. I will say that I was honored to be the initial executive director at DC Fiscal Policy Institute and lead it for the last 2 decades. It is now under the very, very able leadership of Erica Williams, who's the executive director. And if you haven't had her on at some point, you should have her. Certainly, the mission is being and vision are being driven forward by her, with me as a big supporter and partner. I mean, going way, way back, I understood as a little child that money had a really important role in people's lives, and that people sort of, whatever, it just had a huge impact on people's lives. And at some point in college, I got through some really beneficial professors, radicalized, or at least aware of tremendous economic inequity in the United States in particular, and how much of that was driven by race, and was really given opportunities to do my own research and then tell my own story about that. And that's what sort of converted me to thinking about how to use money as a way to help people, not just as a way to enrich individuals. I came to DC initially to work for the Higher Achievement Program, now called Higher Achievement, which works with middle school kids to help them academically and socially and help prepare them for good high schools. I was working in Ward 1 in Columbia Heights and Shaw and Mount Pleasant, which at that point in the 80s were still predominantly black and brown working class communities. And I just saw how much their parents cared about their kids, and how much these kids, how much energy and passion they had for life, and yet how few opportunities they had. It was my first experience as a kid growing up in the Midwest in a predominantly white community, seeing a black and brown community and the injustices they suffered. And it inspired me to do more as well. And then, I just committed my life at that point, and really had been fortunate to devote my entire life to advocating for policy changes that advance economic and racial justice. And as I said, I deeply understood very early on that money mattered, and that where our, who we taxed and where our budget money went could play the difference between maintaining, inequality or defeating it, and that there were very powerful interests that said, "Don't tax me," or "Don't spend money on these communities," that we needed to fight against. And all of that sort of grew up in the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, which was where I spent about a decade. The Center on Budget and Policy Priorities created the DC Fiscal Policy Institute to focus just on DC, because the Center on Budget is sort of a national policy organization. And they really gave me the freedom to set an agenda, to do research, and then engage in coalition with community-based groups and other advocates to fight for economic justice. So early on, fighting for things like more money for affordable housing and expanding the earned income tax credit. And on the flip side, getting rid of really wasteful corporate tax subsidies that were lining the pockets of very well off institutions and people, and not actually advancing anything good for the city at all. And it has been such a rewarding experience. And the fact that I got to start at DCFPI as just one person, it was a one-person organization in 2001, and then to build it up over 2 decades, to the point that the business community, I don't know if you know this, they said, "We're getting getting our butts kicked by the DC Fiscal Policy Institute. We need to do something about it," and decided to create their own counter think tank, the DC Policy Center, which I will say is not really a counter think tank at this point. It's business oriented, but does really quality research. But one of my sources of pride that we were doing such a good job at fighting for things like a better minimum wage and better taxation of wealthy residents, and investing it in the community, that corporate leadership in the city felt like they needed to do something about it and create their own organization.
I love it. I love it. And I tell you, as a Washingtonian, um, so often, like, we feel when someone, by the way, I didn't know that you came from the Midwest. All these years I never knew that.
I
But
did.
we feel so often that, like, when someone comes from a West Coast, from a Midwest, from the further north, that they're going to come and they're not going to help us. It means, it doesn't mean anything good for us when we see these people come into our city. That's a lot of the thinking of the Washingtonians, and in particular of Black Washingtonians. I know. So it's so great to have you, and to actually know you as a friend, and as a co-laborer in the work, that you actually came with the mindset of, hey, I want to help. So I definitely appreciate that, and that definitely means a lot to me.
Well, thank you for saying that. It means a lot for you to say that. And I'll just say that it's the kids of higher achievement and their families that really got me inspired, that like I just needed to continue fighting for them. And fortunate, life just brings you down paths you just don't necessarily know or not, right? And the fact that I was
Yeah.
able to stay in the nonprofit world, and able to stay in a path that allowed me to really fight for what I believed in, and still be able to raise my family and stay in DC. Like, it's just a real blessing, because a lot of folks are in jobs that they are not very happy about, or they have to take because they need the money, or just whatever, aren't aligned with their values. And the fact that I've been able to make my profession, not just my personal time, something that is about my values, and to be, somewhat relatively, hopefully unapologetic in fighting for things, I just can't use any other word to say than it's a blessing.
I was just about to respond with, it's such a blessing. It's a blessing to be able to do what you love, to be able to enjoy your work, and also be able to get paid for it at the
Exactly.
same time.
Yeah.
It's a blessing.
Yes,
I
it is.
definitely understand
Yeah.
that. um, but I did wanted to ask. That was over 20 years ago, when the DC Fiscal Policy Institute was founded. Looking back, what problems do you feel were able to be solved? I know you kind of talked about the minimum wage and a few things just now. And also, what do you think wasn't solved and still has work to be done?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say it's mostly in the area of work to be done. And I should also say that mission and vision that you laid out was not where DC Fiscal Policy Institute started. I think I need to acknowledge that I started in a predominantly white public policy advocacy space, and even though it talked about poverty, was uncomfortable talking about race and the role of race in poverty and inequality in DC. And I really needed um, to be schooled more by folks locally in DC that you can't talk about poverty without talking about race, that you're hiding the truth if you do that. And so just appreciation to everybody who helped make sure that DC Fiscal Policy Institute became not just an anti-poverty organization, but an organization focused on anti-Blackness and anti-racism. I'll just give you one early example of something where I think we made a big difference, but also like the work is really undone. So in 2001, way back at the beginning, Anthony Williams proposed creating a housing production trust fund, which many of your listeners will know about. Or at least not creating it, but creating a dedicated funding source for it. It existed, but it had no money, so it wasn't doing anything. And it's intended to provide grants that support the development of affordable housing. And he proposed legislation with a dedicated funding source, but he also wanted to target all the housing projects at what would today be family income of about $120,000 for a family of four. And a lot of folks came up to me in the advocacy community and the community-based organizations like, this isn't going to help the people who really need it. Can you help make the case that it's not going to help the people who really need it? So we were able to do an analysis that showed where the money was going by income group and where the affordable housing challenges were by income group, and showing that there was just this mismatch, that the housing trust fund serving 80% median family income, to use the official term, wasn't going to address the people, wasn't going to help the people who really needed affordable housing. And through that, and we partnered with Kathy Patterson, who was on the DC Council at that time.
Yeah.
We got a requirement. She changed the law so that half of all the funding in the Housing Production Trust Fund had to go to folks at the lowest income targeting that is used in housing programs, 30% of median family income, which is still not super low income, but much better than where it was. And so that's a huge success from way back in our initial term. But we then found implementation was a huge issue, that they actually were not awarding funds serving the lowest income families for a variety of reasons, but in part because you can stretch the dollars more if the rents are set at $2,000 rather than at $1,000 or $800. The subsidy needed is just a lot smaller when rents are a lot higher. So we've had to push to make sure they actually meet that targeting, and then also fight to make sure there's adequate funding. And is sad to say, in the 20 years that I've been doing this work, or 25, we all know affordable housing challenges for the poorest and lowest income families have gotten worse, not better. And even under Mayor Bowser, with her big plan to create affordable housing, almost all of it was targeted at the folks above the level of the folks who really need the most help, the folks who are struggling to pay their rent, who are living in often terrible conditions, who currently are being blamed for rental arrears that landlords face, who can't get emergency rental assistance because nobody wants to fund it. So there's just so much more work to be done to really make the case for housing as a human right and targeting the people who really need the most help, who really have been left out for a long, long time.
Absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. And just to put this in perspective, in 2001, I was a freshman in high school.
All right.
So this guy has been doing this work for a very, very long time, and I pray that I can endure just as long in this. If you don't know, this DC political environment can be tough. And so that's very, very commendable. Very, very commendable.
Well, one of the things that does keep me going, that I know you know this, and hopefully your listeners do as well, is that if we don't do anything, then we definitely will get rolled over. And if we do something, there's not a guarantee that we'll win, but but we can make big differences. And I just see this every single year. I mean, this year we fought to stop time limits on TANF cash assistance. We stopped the attack on immigrant healthcare through the DC Healthcare Alliance. We saved pay increases for childcare teachers, all because people
Yes.
organized and got involved. So if you're out there thinking your voice doesn't matter, testifying doesn't matter, going to a rally, what's that going to do? It matters. It matters. It doesn't guarantee you're going to win, but we know that it does make a difference, and it is the thing that leads to the victories that we do have.
So how did we get from DC FPI and doing and being that kind of researcher and thinker to legislative advocacy with UPO?
Yeah, well, as some of your listeners may know, I had a couple breaks at DC Fiscal Policy Institute where I tried to change my career by running for DC Council. I was frustrated after 15 years at the DC Fiscal Policy Institute that in the city that uses the term progressive or liberal or left or whatever it is you want to call it, that we were fighting to get 7 votes on the DC Council, which is what you need for a win, for some of the most basic things. Like there was this issue where credit card companies could garnish your wages if you were behind on your credit card bills, if your earnings were more than $200 a week. And that was because that $200 threshold had been set like 50 years ago. And we were like, let's raise that threshold to be at least, they can't garnish your wages till you're at least at full-time minimum wage income, which itself is not enough. We had to struggle to get 7 votes for that. Can you believe that? I mean,
Wow.
that's just, yeah. And in this kind of city. So that is what prompted me to run, because I was like, we can only get so far with good data and community organizing if the people we're electing aren't accountable to the community.
Yeah.
So I challenged Phil Mendelson in 2018 to uncover that his claims of being a progressive were not really accurate. He had fought against tenant purchase rights. He fought against taxing wealthy people. He just wasn't a champion of equity, in economic or racial equity, in my opinion. Didn't win, ran again in 2020. And when I ran in 2020 for an at-large DC Council seat, that's when I decided to leave the DC Fiscal Policy Institute. After 20 years, I thought this is a time for somebody else to shape the vision, particularly create an opportunity for a person of color to lead the organization rather than sitting in that seat comfortably for the rest of my life, which, I could have potentially done if I wanted to, or rest of my career. And when I lost in 2020 and had to resign from the DC Fiscal Policy Institute, I needed to figure out where I wanted to go next. And after a couple of years, I personally reached out to United Planning Organization. I had worked with them at DCFPI doing presentations at their board meetings and meeting with their community leadership academy to talk about the issues that I worked on. And I just had a deep respect for UPO as a longstanding organization that always had Black leadership, that was deeply rooted in the community, particularly in Ward 8. And so I reached out to the CEO. I'm like, I'm looking for a job. I'd love to come work for UPO. And it just happened to be that they were creating an advocacy division, a small advocacy division, but something that they had not had for a while. The CEO, who had been at UPO for a long time, but only in that role for a few years, understood that we cannot solve poverty through job training alone and food distributions alone and childcare. Like, we actually need to address the systemic factors. That was her approach. So she created the division, and I leaped at it with the opportunity to work for this really community-rooted organization, with hopefully the opportunity to actually not just promote my own policy ideas, but actually work with staff and other and people in the community to shape an agenda that was racially and economically just. So similar to the work at DC Fiscal Policy Institute, but just very different to do that within this really substantial, deeply connected organization. And I know I've talked on a little bit, but for folks who don't know, United Planning Organization, founded in 1962 and called United Planning Organization because it really was part of the war on poverty at a time when the federal government still managed DC. And so it was in a lot of partnership with federal agencies around poverty. It has been the recipient of the Community Services Block Grant for a long time, which provides funding to community-based organizations to address poverty. We are a big provider of childcare. We do job training. We provide permanent supportive housing support. We run the city's shelter hotline, where we go and deliver things to people on the street or take them to shelter if that's what they need. We help people with free tax preparation. We do a lot of job readiness, help you with your resume and job search. A combination of making sure people are economically stable and then trying to give them opportunities to be, economically mobile. And that's broadly what UPO does. And we serve over 50,000 people every year through our various services.
Yeah, I will say that about wow, I'm getting old. More than maybe a little over a decade ago. Um, I actually I'm a business major, and my degree is in business administration. But I as I got into the nonprofit world and started to do my own thing, I was able to go through the entrepreneurship program with UPO. And even though I had went to school, I had been out for a while, I was able to really sharpen up on some things. I was able to even learn a lot of new things. They helped me with a business plan. They even referred me to a few investors. We had like an event where some investors came out, and we presented our business plan. So I really admire and appreciate the work that they have done. They really helped me get started on my nonprofit journey. I'm trying to find some resources now because I'm trying to dive into the 501c4 journey. So I'm like, I need some
Oh,
help
all
with
right.
this.
Yeah, I don't know if
Uh,
UPO jumps into that thing, but yeah, that's so great to hear, and it is. Yeah, it's inspiring in many ways. It's not surprising with an organization that's been around for 60 years and does so many things. And because it's multi-services, someone might come in for one reason and then get supported to do, in a more than one way. It is not, in many ways, not surprising to run into yet another person who has benefited from UPO's work.
oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. But
I
speaking
have,
of the UPO and the, I'm gonna let you talk in a second.
yeah.
But speaking of the UPO and the child care, I did wanted to play this clip, and so we'll get back right after this.
New tonight, budget cuts are impacting early learning centers across the district, and we've learned that the United Planning Organization will be forced to close several locations. Its Office of Early Learning is one of DC's largest early Head Start providers. Our Randy Hildreth explains the impact that this will have on families on a short notice.
Yaliska Hawkins thought she struck gold when she got her 2-year-old Gianni into United Planning Organization's early learning program.
I waited about a year, and then just to get that, we got approved in August, and we're like, oh my God, like everything's going great for me.
But then this week,
Boom, it's took it, and it's like, what I'm gonna do?
UPO announced it's closing 4 of its 15 early childhood education centers, including Gianni's at Randall Highlands. The organization says 58 students are impacted and 22 teachers will lose their jobs. Parents shared this letter they received from UPO this week. In it, the organization says reductions in local, federal, and private funding combined with steadily increasing operational costs led to the closures. In a statement, the CEO said in part, quote, "We come to this decision with sadness, and our hearts are with the children, families, educators, and directors who will be impacted by these closures."
Families say they were told the last day is April 8th. Now they say they are processing this big change and scrambling to figure out what's the best thing to do for their child.
In shock. Regina Crawford's son attends Randall Highlands too. UPO says it's working to place students at other sites, but Crawford says location is crucial for her family's routine and other options are tight.
I did call a few yesterday, and they're all saying that they're booked. They have a wait list until August.
Andrew Evans' child attends the Ketchum location, which will close. He says the other daycare options available are hundreds of dollars more expensive, so he wishes families knew sooner.
This is a month to make a huge decision for your family that's going to set the rhythms and set the budget for your family in pretty profound ways.
Families say they're also devastated that it appears reductions in funding led to this.
It's kind of like tight now. Like we got money for wars, but we don't have money to put into our children. It's kind of this I'm all in emotions right now. Like, it's kind of just stressing me out because, like, what do I do next?
Randy Hildreth, WUSA 9.
And shout out to WUSA 9 for that great and awesome clip. As the legislative advocacy um, for UPO, what do you feel is the next steps to prevent things like this from happening?
Yeah, and I appreciate your sharing that clip. It obviously is a really sad moment for the city and a sad moment for UPO. We're much more excited when we're able to expand services and have to retract them. It also is just a reminder that so much of it comes down to money. And can we find the money? Can we convince our leaders to find the money? Which is why I have spent so much of my career focused on the fiscal side of promoting economic and racial justice. And I will, by the way, it's a diversion, but DC Fiscal Policy Institute, one of their T-shirts, one of their sayings is that tax justice is racial justice, right? I mean, it's
Yes.
ultimately down to, like, are we willing to tax the people who can afford to pay to then actually fight economic and racial injustice? So in this case, we have fought for years as a city to advance universal access to affordable quality childcare. We've raised standards to make sure that people who are teaching in childcare are, have at least an associate's degree or a college degree, because we recognize that it's not childcare. Early childhood education is supporting kids at the most important period of their cognitive development. And yet, we have not until recently compensated those teachers at a level that reflects their professionalism, which makes it hard to actually recruit people and certainly makes it hard to retain them. And it's just wrong as a matter of respect. So we also have to make sure that we have enough money in the system so that every family who needs support with childcare assistance can get it, and that the subsidy amount per child is enough that providers can actually make ends meet and provide it. Because, when you think about early childhood education, where you've got one teacher for maybe 3 or 4 children, as opposed to a public school setting where it's one teacher for 20 or 25 children or more, like, the economics are just so tough that there's no way to make it work without substantial government subsidy. And we've had a mayor who, unfortunately, Mayor Bowser, was not part of the early championing of the Birth to 3 legislation that tried to strengthen the childcare system with more money for subsidy, more money for home visiting, and more money to pay teachers better. The council funded those initially 5 years ago with a tax increase on millionaires. But then over the last 2 years, the mayor again swept those funds, with the council fighting back because of the activism of the community, including directly impacted teachers and families. So it ultimately, we know what we need to do. It ultimately comes down to political will, because if the will is there, the money can be found. We cannot do anything in the DC budget we want, but certainly we can create a healthy childcare system. And I will say, as I'm sure many of your listeners know, our Democratic nominee for mayor, Janice Lewis George, probably number one thing on her campaign platform was universal access to affordable, high quality childcare. And so I am tremendously hopeful that as she becomes mayor, she's not the mayor yet, but almost certainly will win the election in November and then take office next January, that one of the earliest things she's going to do is strengthen our early childhood system. So you ask what needs to be done. It ultimately does come down to electing people who will make this a priority and then holding them accountable, right? We need to, as residents, make sure that our mayor-elect remembers this promise and follows through in a as quickly as possible manner.
Totally agree, and then I'll go ahead and say it. I believe so much will change when Mayor-elect Janice takes office this upcoming year. I am so looking forward to it. Someone asked me and they said, I want to see the same energy that you had against Mayor Bowser for all of these years when Janice gets in office. And I said, hey, listen, if it's an issue that she falls short on, I'll definitely hold her accountable. But the problem is, I don't think I'll need the same energy that I had against Mayor Bowser when it comes to Janice. I am so looking forward to less stress, if you will, at least from the mayor's office, at least.
Yeah,
Uh,
you and me both.
well, we were talking about child poverty, and I just wanted to bring this statistic up. Um, this was a statistic that said that in 2023 to 2024, child poverty rose a lot from 16.9% to 28.1%. More than one out of every four children are experiencing poverty. That was the largest single increase in at least a decade. And of course, it would only be right that this statistic comes from the DCFPI. How can we change this?
Yeah, I mean, let's just start with like how shocked that is. And I remember just having a conversation just this last weekend with someone who was not super familiar with sort of the extent of poverty in DC. And when I said, yeah, one out of four kids in DC is below poverty, they just almost didn't believe it. But it is true. And also just to make sure what everybody knows, what does it mean to be in poverty? Because yeah, poverty, if the poverty threshold for a family of three is somewhere around 25,000, and for a family of four, it is somewhere around 35,000. And you and I both know that if you're a single parent raising two kids, and your income is $25,000 a year or $26,000 a year, no one can say you are not poor or not struggling to make ends meet. The combination, particularly of housing and food and those rising expenses and everything else that families have to pay for, there's just no way you can support a family adequately, and that we really need to think about a different measure of poverty that is really reflects what it costs to make ends meet. I will say that again, the answer comes down to will. What political will do we have? There is potentially, likely, I don't know the answer to that, a ballot initiative that we all could be voting for in November to raise the minimum wage to $25 an hour. Because right now it's $18 an hour, which is much higher than the federal level. But an 18-hour job means you're making $36,000 if you work full time year round. It's still obviously not all that much. And so there's a ballot initiative that would raise that over the next few years to $25 an hour. And that's still not what you would call a living wage. But in a city that is so prosperous and has so much unequal wealth, where 0.4% of the population holds half of the wealth in our community, it is reasonable to say that businesses can afford to pay more, even as we struggle under President Trump and what he's doing to our economy. So part of it does start with actually holding businesses accountable. It means also strengthening demands around labor union jobs in DC. You know, I just heard a story today about the city, funding RFK Stadium, and we're going to own it. We're paying $1 billion, and we ultimately will be responsible for maintaining it. Naming rights and personal seat licenses, which will generate roughly $1 billion for the Commanders. 100% of that goes to them. So, as we're sitting and resting in that, whether you're a Commanders fan or not, that is not about economic equity. And so the question then becomes, what do we do to make sure everyone working to build and then manage and work at the stadium is a union worker with union protections, with union wages? And then what do we do to spread that beyond DC? What can we do to make sure that young people are given the opportunity, whether that's to go to college or to learn a trade, that when they get a job, that it actually will be a decent job with good protection? Whether you're a gig worker, whether you are a tipped worker, there's just so much economic injustice. And then I think we just have to recognize that we are in an unequal economy, and even with the best job protections, there are going to be people making less than what it takes to make ends meet. And that's where government comes in, whether that's the child tax credit the earned income tax credit, like using the tax system to do some form of guaranteed income support, because that's really what the earned income tax credit or child tax credit is. Is we're going to give you money based on the fact that you are not earning enough or you're raising children, and so it's guaranteed income by another name, and making sure that we have universal access to health insurance that's been under attack in recent years, but making sure that everybody who's not getting it on their job or can't afford their what it takes to get their employer provided health insurance can get it. And then, making sure that we are truly addressing our affordable housing challenges at the scale that they need, that the 50,000 households who are spending more than half of their income on housing actually get some relief, that we're holding landlords accountable to providing quality housing and also creating the government assistance that's needed to make housing affordable. I'm a supporter of rent control as well. I've just seen rents rise throughout the city. I was in Brookland for 30 years, and when I was there in the 1990s, it was a much more affordable community than it is now. And what changed was gentrification, not necessarily that the neighborhood had dramatically changed. And so landlords were making a lot more money than they were before, and not necessarily because their expenses were rising, but just because it was a more popular community. So I support managing our rents in a way that has people in mind and not necessarily landlords in mind. Understanding that rent control has to have certain, it can't. They have to be landlords still have to make money, or they're not going to become landlords and they're not going to maintain their buildings. But we can achieve a better balance.
Speaking of rent control, I put a graph up for our viewers, talking about the rent burden, especially east of the river. It says nearly 45% of DC renters are rent burdened, meaning they spend more than 30% of their income on rent. That rises to 53.8% in Ward 7 and 57.1% in Ward 8. Among extremely low income renters earning roughly 32,500 or less, 85.2% are rent burdened. And of course, that is a statistic that comes and graph that comes from the DC FBI. Hey, listen, I just want to make a note. I just want to let everyone know I work for Monument Academy. I think that I do a pretty darn good job. I think that it comes with an abundance of stress. And I am one of the 53.8% of Ward 7 residents who spends at least 30%. Who spends at least half of my check
Mm.
on rent. I literally take each check and I say take half. That's for rent. The other half is for bills and for me to, I guess, go out one time this week. And and that's my process. Hopefully I have a couple that I can save and try to start some type of saving so I can get a house. But every year I need more and more to save for a house too. So it's like, look, this is getting crazy. This is getting out of hand, and something must be done. A part of my plan when I ran for office at that time 4 years ago was to raise minimum wage. A part of that minimum wage plan was to have it by $25 an hour this year. 4 years ago, people told me that I was crazy, that I lost my mind, that it couldn't happen, that it was impossible to pass, that businesses couldn't survive. I was told 1,001 things.
Hmm.
What is like the end game? I believe that our current council member and mayor elect Janice also has a plan with this. I'm also looking forward to a couple of new council members
Yeah.
who are fairly progressive and who also have some ideas when it comes to this. But this must stop. This is getting to become an impossible place to live. And me personally, I try to, I'm not one out here who's doing crime. I try to live a decent life, and I try to help my neighbors, but it's a struggle, and I genuinely mean it is a struggle to live in this city.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I can't tell you the number of people I've talked to, a single parent with a couple of children in a job that doesn't pay all that well, and and I know they're living in a place that is not that desirable for them. It's not that close to their job. The landlord isn't taking care of the unit, and then they'll tell me they're paying $2,000 a month in rent, and I'm like, that just doesn't add up. That's just not right. And one of the things that I've followed in recent years is the rising number of evictions, which is, of course, like the
Mhm.
worst and most traumatic impact of our affordable housing crisis. And the number of people evicted in DC, it's about 50 people, 50 households every week, and
Wow.
it jumped by 1/3 last year, 1/3 last year, and we know that. Eviction is a reflection of poverty, but it's a cause of poverty, because if you lose your home, you lose your things, your credit rating suffers, your children suffer this trauma that is hard to recover from. It is just one of the worst things that can happen to a family. So we just need a government that is laser focused on we want to make sure people will pay the rent if they can, but we're also going to protect them if they can. And yeah, we have to do we have to do better. It ultimately comes down to, are we devoting the right amount of resources? Are we making sure the agencies are being held accountable? And are we actually devoting the resources to people who need the most help? And like you, I am hopeful that Janice Lewis George is eager to make sure that we are creating a variety of uh, affordable housing options, including social housing, which we can talk about if you want, and that doing so will not only give people stable housing, and stable housing is the foundation of a stable life, but also then perhaps, like you, give them the opportunity, perhaps set some funding aside to actually think about home ownership. Because I know so many people just don't even imagine ever owning a home because of it's just so out of reach in DC.
Yeah, and speaking of evictions, not only um is it a cause, and a sign of poverty, uh but also when it comes to um some people say homelessness. I guess we've changed it to unhoused. um but it's such a roadblock, and I'm humble and transparent enough to say that I'm speaking from experience, and I'm still experiencing it. It's such a roadblock that when you do try to do better, and you do get your finances and your life together, because this is in your past, it's on your resume. um it's like these new companies, and these new management companies, they just won't accept you. They just don't want nothing to do with you because they see that you've had an eviction. They don't care that COVID came and this happened and that happened. They don't care about any of that. They're like, look, sorry, we can't help you. Or the ones that do, they say, hey, look, we can help you, but we need you to have $3,000 of down payment, security deposit first. And I'm like, I'm gonna need another month for that now. Like,
Yeah.
so it's huge. It's huge, and we gotta look at different creative ways to create some legislation, and also to be accountable on the council
Yeah. Well,
for these things.
as you know, the idea of social housing is expanding the base of government managed, government owned housing. We have a law that allows the district to buy buildings and then manage them, the District Opportunity to Purchase Act. And given that some buildings are actually struggling with vacancies and their values are down, this might be an opportunity to buy those buildings. And then if the district owns the building, it can manage the rents to say, hey, we can use the market rate rents perhaps to cover lowering the rents for some people. And we can be accommodating to people who might have a spotty record in the past that might make a private landlord nervous, but the district, being more people oriented, can do something better. So that is also my hope, is that we continue to move beyond the current model of just privately owned housing for profit, where a landlord doesn't necessarily have an incentive to maintain the units, doesn't necessarily feel obligated to keep people in their buildings, doesn't feel obligated to take somebody in if they're consider them a risk. And not that I blame a landlord for making a private landlord that is using their property for profit for being worried about whether someone can pay rent or not, but the outcome is that people who were victims of an unfair housing system then get further victimized when they can't access housing that they might even at that point be able to afford, but a landlord just won't take them in.
Yes, yes. Totally uh agree. Totally agree. And thank you for that. Um we're nearing the end of our show actually. It was actually a great show. I'm very, very pleased and the outcome. I'm very excited of how it went down. I think that a lot of your responses kind of flowed right into where I was going anyway with the show. And so that's always
Perfect.
like, okay, in our church world, we say we were on one accord. So
Pastor Mike,
I
I
definitely
was going to
appreciate it.
ask you, you and I have known each other for a long time, and I was just trying to remember, like, when did we first interact? And I don't remember. And I was just going to ask you, if you recall sort of when you and I first encountered each other, or maybe the first thing we worked on together.
Um, I don't know, but I'll tell you a portion of a private conversation I had with Rini when she ran for mayor. After the elections, we had talked, and I actually referenced you. I don't even know if you remember having this conversation. But I said I want to tell you the same thing that a guy named Ed Lazere told me. I said when I ran for office, afterwards, I came to I think it was a DC Dems meeting. And I said, and you told me, you said, hey, look, I love your energy. And we have a lot of people who run for office and they disappear. I would like to see you stick around and actually fight with us. And I promised then, I said, oh, I'll be here and I'm not going anywhere. I'm not one of those who just decide to just run. As a matter of fact, this is probably my introduction into DC politics. And so, and I gave her the same charge. Like, I want to see you, and so I can't remember exactly when or what, but I know I was running for office
Mm.
and I had learned that you had ran for office and I had just started looking you up and you probably don't even know this, but started studying you, listening to your talking points, and and reading up on some of the things that you had ideas about, and I was like, man, this guy and I think alike, and I like him, and ever since then, whether it was I think we did some under three work together with
Yeah.
Travis,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
so ever since then, man, it's just been you're my guy.
Appreciate that. And I think, hopefully you figured out as well that when you run for office, you build so many connections and some visibility that even if you lose, you come out stronger than you did before you ran, because people
Yes.
people respect you for running and they know you, and you've built the relationships, and all of our social change starts with the relationships that then lead to organizing. And so uh, I never, yeah, I didn't understand that until I ran, but I'm so glad that I have run for office to build on my work in the policy
Yes.
advocacy space, and what it has allowed me to learn, and the people it's allowed me to engage with and build relationships with.
Yeah. Hey, look. Also, before we close, I did want to say is I don't. I think it was you that invited me. I'm not sure, but I know I was invited by UPO to do to speak at a graduation, and man, I really enjoyed it. I just wanted to throw it out there. I would love to do it again anytime.
Oh, that's great.
And like it's always great when you can kind of see peers or people at least younger than you um that are kind of doing something positive, trying to do change their life, trying to just make a difference. And so like it was so fulfilling, especially as someone who does a lot of times I was talking to my lady and I said, it's mentally tolling that I've done so many funerals and
Mm,
all of them have been people younger than me.
Mm.
I've only done one or two funerals where the person was older than me, and that's heartbreaking. And so I enjoy graduations or something that
Yep.
just is
Yep.
giving life. So I really enjoyed that, and I just wanted to let you know I did appreciate that moment. I probably was nervous. It was the first time I ever spoke to a crowd that was like a graduation crowd that was an interfaith crowd in that setting. And so it definitely was a learning experience, but man, I definitely enjoyed it and left it feeling fulfilled. So I appreciate
Well,
that.
we will have you back. Yes, and I will just echo that the work that UPO does to maintain economic security, to help people who are on the street, to help people with a substance abuse disorder, to help distribute meals, like that is just so essential. It can be life changing, but it is also so nice when you've gone that further step and given somebody an opportunity to, to find a career, to have their own apartment, and just to feel so much better about themselves. Like we need to do both. And it is definitely rewarding when you can see that your difference has actually helped someone do better in their life.
All right. So I think that's it, man. I'm glad to have you. I didn't mention that he's also, this guy does so much. He's also one of our former leaders at DC for Democracy.
Amen. Yeah.
The guy is just amazing, and we will definitely try to pick his brain and have him back on some more specific issues in the future. But as for now, I ask you to stay tuned. Every Wednesday night at 6 p.m. we are live, and this has been absolutely one of our greatest seasons. I thank our supporters so much, and I think I've said this before, but to my surprise, I have a huge following on Facebook and IG. But when it comes to this show, to my surprise, it's you guys on X that are showing up. It's you guys on X that are viewing us, that can I say retweet still? I don't know what it is when it's an X. I guess it
Yeah.
would be
What
X.
people know what that means. Yes.
Like when you're retweeting us. So I definitely support. I definitely appreciate the support on X. I want to remind everyone that we are on Spotify. I know it's fairly new, but if you can't listen, I mean you can't watch. You're in your car. You can listen. Tune in on Spotify. All of our episodes are available. But until next time, stay blessed. And this is the People's Voice DC.
Thank you.
I pause real quick. If you're from DC or you love DC, this one's for you.